Hey there.
Hello.
Today, we're going to talk about Huey Long.
All right. Huey P. Long.
Huey P. Long, that one.
That's the guy. Junior, right? He's a junior?
He is a junior. He was also nicknamed the Kingfish, which is extremely cool.
That's a dope name.
Right? Like, I love that. I would love to be called the Kingfish.
In our space D&D game, our vessel that was stolen in the first episode, basically, from pirates and has become the party space vessel. It's called the Queenfish.
Didn't it used to be called the Kingfish, and we're just like, nah.
Yeah, it was originally called the Kingfish, and this was my inspiration for it, actually.
Oh, that's hilarious. Well, now it's a transgender spaceship, so.
Hell yeah.
Living the gay space communist life.
All right, let's jump in.
All right, so we've mentioned this guy a couple times in the pod. So he's come up in our UBI episode, episode 19, Black Panther episode 29, and we briefly mentioned a quote from him in episode 36, which is part 1 of Open Veins of Latin America.
Oh, yeah, about Standard Oil, right? He did not like them.
His arch fucking nemesis.
One way you can judge people is based on the enemies they make. So
honestly, yeah. The very basics, he was a lawyer, governor, and then senator in Louisiana.
All right.
And was primarily known as a populist Democrat, very controversial figure, which we'll talk about.
For our non-American listenership, Louisiana is a state next to Texas in the southern part of the United States.
It's very southeast.
On the Gulf Coast there, yeah.
Yeah. So I also want to mention briefly some of my sources. I did this very entertaining thing where I pulled up his Wikipedia article on one page and went to his official website on the other side of my screen.
Oh, damn.
And read them kind of like back and forth for each section. And it was really funny because his website is run like by his family. So it's just super biased and hilarious. It's good.
It's like a foundation type, like the Mount Vernon website for George Washington or something. Or like a presidential library, but for a governor sort of thing.
Yeah, yeah. And then I also watched the Ken Burns documentary on PBS. I believe it's just called Huey Long. It's very easy to find.
The American Experience one?
Yeah. I actually had to rent it because I couldn't figure out how to get onto my PBS membership. So
I watched that long ago in college sometime, so I don't remember too much of it. But
let's start at the beginning. He was born, as most people are.
Born, not hatched.
Born, not hatched, not incubated, none of that weird stuff. Did not spring fully formed. Although he probably would have told somebody that if it got him somewhere. He was born in 1893 in Winfield, Louisiana. And he was part of Wynn County or Wynn Parish. I think Louisiana has parishes instead of counties.
Yes, that's right.
For non-American listeners, that's just like a smaller part of a state.
Yeah, it's the same thing as a county.
So this county has kind of a history of being very poor and also a little, I wouldn't say leftist, but a little different. So they were Unionists in the Civil War. Okay,
and this was in northern Louisiana, I guess, because it was poorer, right? So that was like where the poorer land would have been.
Yeah. In the documentary, they're talking about how Louisiana, like I think a lot of states, especially being from Texas, could really be like 4 states in terms of like different regions of it. And they're like, no one's ever really been able to unify northern Louisiana with like southern Louisiana, which is like New Orleans and Baton Rouge and all like the cities.
Okay, yeah.
But he was one of the few people that kind of was able to do that.
All right.
So yeah, Wynn Parish was actually against secession, and they really saw rich slaveholders as class enemies, which I'm like, yeah.
Cool.
And actually later on, 35% of that parish voted for Eugene Debs, which we have also mentioned several times on this pod.
Hell yeah, socialist candidate for the presidency of the United States a number of times, right?
Yeah, I think like 3, I don't know. Quite a few.
Yeah. Wow, 35%. 35% voting socialist in
Yeah,
in
crazy,
Louisiana
right?
County.
So anyway, he was born, and he claims, because his whole persona was very much like, I'm a cool Southern dude, like I'm just a down-home country boy.
Okay.
So he claimed he was born in a log cabin, and they interview his sister in the documentary, and she's like, Well, the house was made of logs, but it was like a giant farmhouse. And they show a picture of it, and it's beautiful. So yeah.
Not exactly a cabin.
Mm-hmm. And they were pretty well off compared to
I was going to
else.
ask, his parents were okay then?
Yeah, they like owned a farm, and they were doing all right. And they had a ton of kids, 9 kids total.
Well, that's the same thing as William Henry Harrison did that back in the day. He was the first log cabin presidential candidate. But, it was just like kind of where he was from, but it wasn't like a log cabin situation.
It's not what
he
you
was
think
like
of.
His family was well off and stuff. So this is a tried and true American tradition. Act like you're
real.
common.
I'm just going to build a cabin in the backyard or something and be like, yeah, I've got a cabin. Totally. This story comes from his website, so like sprinkle a grain or two of salt on it. Okay. But there's a story about an 8-year-old Huey Long witnessing a farmer losing their land at auction, and he was like really upset by it. And like the farmer begged the crowd not to like bid on it, but then he lost it anyway to the creditor, and it like really horrified him.
Wow. You know what they used to do with those is if they could organize it ahead of time, is the neighbors, the people of the town and everything, they get together and be like, listen, if some asshole comes in here and tries to buy this, we're going to, threaten him. We're just going to be like, we'll beat you up, dude, afterward.
Shit.
And so then they'd stand around, and look tough, and then nobody would bid on it, and they'd, buy it back for a few dollars and give it back.
That's amazing.
Yeah,
That's
that
so
was
cool.
Old school solidarity.
Yeah, right? Huey was homeschooled until 11. This was super common. For context, in 1920, only half of Louisiana's school-age children attended school.
Wow.
And in 1928, a quarter of adults couldn't read, which is the highest illiteracy rate in the United States at that time.
Man, so nowadays the phrase, I believe, is thank God for Mississippi, because Mississippi, historically anyway, I don't know where the numbers are now, but had like really low stats in all the things you want to have really high stats in. So it's like, well, at least we're not that bad. But back then it was thank God for Louisiana, I guess.
Yeah, definitely. Like we'll see time and again, like the situation there was pretty just impoverished. So I think that plays a big role in his story. Mm-hmm. All right. He gets into school. He does really well. He even skips 7th grade. He just like talks his teachers into it.
Come on, I don't really need to learn all this. I'm smarter than you. I could teach this class.
I mean, basically.
Fuck it, get out of here. Go to the next grade.
In high school, he finished 11th grade, which at the time was the last grade. But then the state voted to add the 12th grade, and he was so pissed that he like circulated a petition about it, and then he got expelled. They're like, fine, just fucking leave.
He sounds like a really annoying student. Like, he is a super nerd, but apparently people just keep sending him on. Like,
oh, yeah. He literally signed his name Honorable Huey P. Long, like, in his textbooks when he was a child. Like, he sounds ridiculous.
Yeah. Esquire.
Yeah. Very weird dude. He had actually won a scholarship to LSU for being on the debate team, but because the scholarship only covered tuition, he couldn't afford textbooks and like the living expenses.
Oh, shit.
So he became a traveling salesman.
Whoa. All right. Different trajectory.
Yeah. And like whenever people talked about it in the documentary, like they're like, I mean, you can tell he was very good at selling shit. He sold everything from cooking oils, patent medicines, shortening, canned goods, laxative, starch, washing powder, just like all kinds of stuff.
Wow, what a trunk he was carrying around.
Yeah. Well, no, so apparently it was a very unstable job. Like, you would just work for a company, and then, like, often those companies would go bankrupt.
What am I selling today? Yeah.
Yeah. So it was very, like, unstable.
Okay.
He kind of dicked around for a while. He tried going to seminary school and dropped out after one semester. And then he borrowed, like, $100 from his brother to go to University of Oklahoma College of Law, and then dropped out after 3 C's and 1 incomplete. So, you know, not super focused.
That's not even that. People come back from worse grades than that. That's not so bad.
I know, right? Like, he could have just kept going. Then finally, he's like, you know what? I'm just going to knock it out. He goes to Tulane University, studies for 1 year, and then he's like, I'm done with this. Petitions the Louisiana Supreme Court to just let him take the bar early. And he passes at age 21.
So he didn't go to college. He just did some law school and was like, I got this, I think.
Yeah, he's like, I can figure it out.
That's kind of dope. That's kind of cool.
Yeah, it's a power move.
Yeah. And he's very successful at convincing people, right? Like, I don't need 7th grade. I don't need the last of high school. I don't need law
laxative.
school. Yeah. He's just not good at selling Jesus. Like, that was not his deal. He,
selling Jesus?
He dropped out of seminary or whatever. He couldn't.
Oh, yeah.
He was like, I don't know if I can. This is a hard sell.
This isn't really my thing. So another pro move, I would say, he put on a baking contest to sell shortening. Like, that was one of his products he was selling.
Okay.
And he met like a hottie there named Rose McConnell.
Ah.
In a total Chad move, he decides to give Rose first place and second place to her mother.
Oh, all right. Smart.
Right? And then they dated for 2 years and got married.
First impressions are everything.
Honestly, yeah. In very much reminiscent of his lifestyle, he borrowed $10 from his fiance to pay the officiant at the wedding.
Oh. Well,
so yeah.
He had the charm. He didn't necessarily have the dough at that time.
So now he's a lawyer. He starts out in Winfield and was very proud of the fact that he never took a case from a rich man. Like, he was always defending the poor. That was his thing.
That's why. So that's why he had to borrow $10. Is he's not
right?
He's not representing the high class clientele.
So yeah, he did a lot of like workers' comp cases, and he even won a case for a widow against the town bank. And like the manager of that bank was his uncle, whose office he like worked above.
Oh,
so like, man, that was probably awkward.
Yeah. But I guess he's going for the underdog. That's the pattern there.
And that's his thing.
Okay.
And then this is our first run-in with Standard Oil, which is going to be a lifelong fucking feud.
Good. Yeah, we encourage our listeners to cultivate lifelong feuds with oil companies.
For sure. Please do it.
They should be your enemy.
Absolutely. So the first instance, which I think is interesting, this is the first one, was in 1918. He invested $10,050, which is about $17K today. Okay. He actually invested this in Standard Oil. A well struck oil, but the company refused to accept the oil for some reason, so he lost his money, and he was like really pissed about it.
Oh.
So, strike one. And then a few years later, in 1921, he represented a small oil company in a lease dispute against Standard Oil and lost, and so I bet he didn't enjoy that either.
So this was less like, you guys are an oil company, and more like, you screwed me over. / my clients. Okay.
Yes, but they're going to come back, and he's going to keep just pushing their buttons.
All right.
But before that, he moved to Shreveport and did some more workers' interest cases. He lobbied the state legislature for workers' comp reform and just generally became really unpopular with the upper class, which is another great thing to do. And then he decides to run for Louisiana Railroad Commission. Will you explain what that position is for our non-American listeners?
Yeah.
Oh, I actually have it written down. Apparently, Past Christine did this research.
All right. There you go.
I blacked out.
A gift from the past.
Gift from past me, they said. It's an independent regulatory agency that manages public utilities and motor carriers. Things like electricity, water, waste, natural gas, telephones, all that kind of stuff. It's utilities. If you're playing Monopoly, it's the utilities.
It's similar to what it is in Texas, the Railroad Commission. It's like the most powerful post besides governor, basically. And it sounds like it's old-timey and weird, but it actually has all this regulatory power over oil and gas, coal, pipelines, obviously actual railroads and stuff. But like, yeah, utilities. And it's just a misnomer, I guess.
Yeah, it sounds like you're just like, what are you, fucking running to make sure the trains go on time? Like, no. Like, yeah.
Right, yeah.
It's way more important than it sounds. It also sounds super country. Like, I'm curious what other states have it and stuff. Like, I don't know.
Yeah.
Anyway, so he runs against this guy called Burke Bridges, which, like, what a name. Sounds like a real cowboy. And There was a runoff, and it was a really close race. He only won by 636 votes, and it's mostly from rural areas.
All right. So he got the country vote?
He did. Keep in mind, he's only 25 years old.
Wow. They elected a 25-year-old railroad commissioner.
So this actually was part of the reasoning he ran for it, was that office was the only one that didn't have an age requirement. And he's like, fuck it, I want to get in politics, so.
Yeah. All right, so he defeated Burke.
He gets in as railroad commissioner and immediately starts pissing people off.
All right.
He forces utilities to lower rates. He forces the railroads to extend service to small towns because, as we talked about, they're going to prioritize like moving stuff instead of people.
Yeah.
And coming back to our old nemesis, he demanded that Standard Oil use more oil from Louisiana wells instead of importing them from Mexico.
Okay. And this did not make him any friends in the business community, I guess?
Defo not. So eventually he becomes chairman of the Railroad Commission. It gets renamed, but whatever. This is 1922, and he sues a telephone company because they raised their rates by 20%. He took it to the Supreme Court and won, and forced the company to like refund 80,000 overcharged customers.
Heck yeah.
Yeah, so he's just like busting shit up, which is hilarious. I love it.
We love to see the underdogs having some victories.
Yeah.
Yeah, you know, it's still like within the system. It's just like legal victories, but it's kind of cool.
Not a bad thing to do, that's for sure.
Yeah, true.
So now he's like, all right, bigger fish to fry. I'm running for governor. So his first campaign was in 1924. And this was against John M. Parker, a guy he had previously campaigned for, but now they were on the outs because Parker refused to make the oil pipelines public utilities. And so Long was like, you're fucking bought by Standard Oil. Like, you suck.
So does that mean he wanted to nationalize, or not nationalize, but stateize oil there, or just like be able to regulate it more, I guess?
I think it was more about regulation, because as we'll see, well, he doesn't ever get quite that radical, but yeah, he definitely wanted more control over them than they were willing to give.
Okay, cool.
At the time, the government in Louisiana was pretty much like post-Reconstruction era Democrats.
Okay.
So these were people who were like very obsessed with the idea of the lost cause.
Yeah, these are very racist folks too, right?
Definitely so. Super racist. So yeah, if you don't know what the lost cause is, that's the idea of like, well, we should have won the Civil War. And this is coming from like the South. So bad shit.
I guess it's a big topic or a big thing to unravel in American history. But basically, after the Civil War, you had a period called Reconstruction where the country's put back together under the domination of the Union, which, you know, keeps military occupation on the former Confederacy and make sure that they do, well, Reconstruction, where they're like passing amendments to undo basically the system of slavery. And instate for the first time, I suppose, more racial equality.
Yeah. Very much like done at gunpoint.
Yes, yeah. And so once that goes away in 1877, in a deal to make Rutherford B. Hayes president, the North stops, I guess the United States overall stops the military occupation of the South. And then these Southern Democrats we're talking about come back to power, saying they're called the Redeemers, and they're like, oh, we're going to bring the South back to being good again, which to them means
being racist.
Yeah, so putting back white supremacy. And that's the Louisiana we're talking about here.
Yeah, not a great situation.
Yeah.
The weird / uncomfortable part about this part of his biography is that Long basically stays pretty neutral. On the issue of race. He doesn't like explicitly side with the KKK, which everyone at the time was like, whoa, that's crazy. But like, that's a low fucking bar.
That was the furthest out he was willing to go on that was, I don't, I'm not in the Klan.
Yeah, basically. And it's a super low bar, but I mean, he hinted at being unhappy with the Klan. Like, apparently the Imperial Wizard Is, I guess, a very high up. I had heard of Grand Wizard. I had not heard of an Imperial Wizard.
I think it's one of those things where you just kind of have to keep making up titles because the whole thing is made up, So in Dragon Ball Z, like, they have a really powerful enemy, but then, like, you have to come up with how actually this new guy is even more powerful,
Definitely. This fucking racist LARPer.
Yeah.
He called him a bastard because he was supposed to, like, come to Louisiana, and he said if he came there, he would leave with, quote, his toes turned up, which I'm like, that's great.
All right. I like it.
Yeah, I mean, like, that's cool, but apparently, like, because you're in that post-Reconstruction era, Black people are still effectively barred from voting through voter suppression, so it was never really an issue for him politically.
Interesting. Okay, so you can't paint him necessarily as, like, a civil rights champion.
I would not, no. I think it's just, like, it didn't come into play for him.
Okay, yeah, so I guess he gets credit, like, for not being a complete racist asshole.
Essentially, yes.
But that's no. We wouldn't say, hey, great job,
All right, so back to his run for governor. He ends up losing this first race. It was the only race he ever lost, but he still got 31% of the vote, which is, like, pretty big for coming in third place.
Oh, a three-way race?
It was the primary.
But it was like you weren't going to really run against anybody for real, so because it was like a one-party state situation. Because it's like the South at that time, it was just solid Democratic. It's like now it's, fairly solid Republican.
I believe that's true, yeah.
Okay.
Overall, he underperformed in urban areas, and he also blamed the rain because at the time, Louisiana, like, basically did not have many paved roads outside, like, the city.
Yeah.
At the time, actually, they only had 300 miles of cement roads.
Oh, goodness.
That's nothing. The whole state. That's
a different era, yeah.
So he was like, well, it rained, and so, like, country folk couldn't travel.
Yeah. Oh, man. How many, like, votes did he lose by if he was down to blaming rain? That's...
I know, right? No idea, but... I mean, it was funny, like, in the documentary, they were interviewing people, and someone was like, yeah, we took a speedboat out to go vote for him. We did, like, 10 miles in the speedboat, and then we walked, and, like, they were traveling for this.
Well, yeah, you had to go to the county seat in a lot of places, I think.
Yeah.
So, that's cool. Well, sucks for him, he lost.
It's cool. He does it again. Oh, he doesn't lose again. He runs again in 1928.
All right. Back at it if at first you don't succeed.
So, new campaign, new slogan. This is where he starts his every man a king, but no one wears a crown slogan, which is just lifted straight up from William Jennings Bryan, who is, like, kind of another populist figure.
Yeah, William Jennings Bryan, people know him from the Scopes trial, which is where he's later in his life and he's not so hot. But before then, they know him from the famous election. He ran against William McKinley in 1896.
Okay.
And it was like this whole, he was super populist. The Populist Party endorsed him, even though he was the Democratic nominee. And he was like, saying, oh, these people want to do the gold standard. They don't give a shit about the common people, all this sort of stuff.
So this is a term we've used a few times now, which is populist. And I was like, I've heard this used a lot. Specifically, I've heard it for using it to define, like, Donald Trump. And so I was like, okay, what is a populist? Just a basic definition, it's just someone who is trying to appeal to ordinary people who feel like elite groups are leaving them out. And I'm like, that sounds good.
It is, I think, in that definition. And I think it's used in the media to kind of denigrate mass appeals in popular discourse. So they'll say, oh, this is bad because it's populist. You need to listen to the experts who say that, liberal democracy is what you want to do. And
it sounds like super hipster. Like, I don't like it because everyone else likes it.
well, it's also very...
It's intellectual.
It's patronizing, I think. Like, because it's like, listen, that sounds nice. Oh, why don't we give people things? But, like, you don't really know, that's actually a bad idea. Like, it's tries to be professorial, I guess, or...
It's like these masses don't know any better.
Your betters know best. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yes.
And in some ways that's, I think, can be correct. Like, for example, okay, you know, the masses that do support Donald Trump, like, you know, they were very, like, incorrect. They did a lot of racist stuff, you know? And the Populist Party, like, had nativist style or, like, you know, they had some bad stripes in there. It wasn't 100% a good thing. And populism isn't always, but I think that it's also used to kind of say appealing to the masses is, you know, bad, it's vulgar, it's, you know, not something we want, even though, you know, we as, you know, Marxists would disagree.
Yeah, I think that's an interesting tension because, yeah, I definitely have picked up on that kind of like racialized connotation of the word. And now it's like, oh, fuck, is this guy like a straight racist? And it's like, it doesn't seem like it. But also, like, we talk a lot about how, like, yeah, the people should be in charge. And it's like, man, what if everyone's an asshole? You know, like, I think that's something I worry about because, like, if we're talking about majority rules, like, that explicitly then will leave out minorities, and that is concerning.
Yeah, and okay, this is where I think that the tendency of, like, Marxist-Leninist or Maoist sort of idea of having a dedicated professional political party, a vanguard party of some sort, you know, a communist party that knows about it, right? And they're like, okay, well, we got to be intersectional. We know how that's like an important, you know, our struggles have to be united to liberate people. They can't let, you know, it just devolve into, oh, let's focus only on capitalism and ignore racism, right? And the, you know, like the mass line idea of get input from the people and then that important step of like putting it into theory and then giving it back, right? Like you don't just want to fix what people tell you to fix, because what if they ignore the plight of the minorities and everything, or whatever oppressed groups there are. You know, you can't just do that. Like you have to also try to address other issues. Yeah,
that makes sense. I also wonder if even the very act of revolution, if you have a big enough solidarity between different groups in that, would then help inform like your system later on. Like people be like, well, those people did fucking like fight for me and do a great job. Like maybe I shouldn't be assholes to them.
Yeah.
Like I think that would be a big catalyst.
We saw that also in the examples when we were doing our disability justice episode, right? Of people with different disabilities, people who were uniting with other groups, representing, you know, racial minorities or women's rights groups or the queer community rights groups, like realizing, hey, we're all oppressed by the same asshole, right? This is one of our, this is another t-shirt slogan is
definitely,
it's the same bad guy, right?
I love it. He's the big bad evil guy.
Yeah. So, yeah, you know, recognizing a common enemy and realizing that, hey, we're stronger together, so why shouldn't we fight for, you know, it's not fighting for someone else's rights to have it better than me. It's fighting for their rights so we can all work together.
Yeah, definitely. Okay, so, sorry, that was a tangent about populism and all kinds of stuff. But back to Long. He's hitting the campaign trail. He's giving speeches. This is where he makes up a lot of his mean nicknames for people.
Oh, yeah.
He basically promises a shit ton of stuff for Louisiana. He's saying roads, bridges, hospital care, education, like all kinds of stuff, right?
I like it. Okay, cool.
Pretty engaging stuff. Learning from last time, he specifically campaigns for Catholic senators in order to get more of the Catholic vote.
Okay, smart.
Yeah.
I mean, your counties are called parishes there, so I would imagine the Catholic vote is
kind of
substantial.
Important. He travels everywhere, especially to rural areas. He's printing out flyers. He's one of the first campaigners in the country to use sound trucks, which look like just a truck with a giant speaker on it, if you don't know what that is.
Oh, yeah. I love these things.
Like an ice cream truck, but for politics.
Yeah.
He did radio ads and just was like everywhere. And, you know, there's lots of footage of him speaking at these really small town events, just like standing on the steps of a building and like he's just surrounded by people.
Wild time. I mean, you were just right up there in it, you know, way less produced and stuff, I guess, than nowadays.
Yeah. He never spoke with notes. He was very just like charming and very much, I mean, again, down home country guy, but like just a plain talker. Like I watched some of the speeches in the documentary and like he was funny. Like he was very charming. It was a contentious election. At one point, he ran into the incumbent in a hotel lobby, and Parker called Long a liar, so Long punched him in the face. This guy is like 60-something years old, too.
Oh, shit.
So, yeah. Aggressive.
That's great. You imagine a governor's race today and one of them gets punched in the face? That'd be fun.
It works out, though. He received 43.9% of the vote, the largest margin in state history, and went on to win the general with 96% of the vote, and became the youngest governor of Louisiana at 35 years old.
Whoa. Damn.
Yeah.
Barely old enough to be president.
Right? Okay, so governorship. How does that go? Let's get into it.
How does it go?
This is where things get a little messy.
Okay, in what way?
Well, I have mixed feelings about it, and we'll talk about it probably at the end. But what he does is he fires a bunch of people who don't like him and establishes, and which, like, is normal. Like, everyone does that.
Yeah.
Like, every administration is like, all right, your people are out, my people are in. Like, that's just what, like, executive branches do.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
He then goes on to establish basically a patronage system.
Okay.
So he would hire someone, like, at the state level, and they would have to pay a portion of their salary that would go into basically his campaign fund.
In a lot of places, that's, like, illegal.
Apparently, it wasn't illegal. Like, I didn't find that it was illegal.
It probably wasn't. We think of kind of good government laws or ethics laws and stuff. Mm-hmm. Those are pretty modern inventions in terms of the American political system. Like, even the secret ballot is a pretty modern invention. Elections used to be basically festival affairs, and you'd show up and each side would be electioneering right up to the point, and it'd be like a party. And they'd be like, come vote for our guy, here's your ballot that's all, like, it says vote for this party. Like, it used to be very, so this notion of, like, impartiality or whatever is not something they were working with. So that's funny, though. Just give me a little bit of the money I'm paying you, right? Like, payback.
Yeah, he would get between 50 and 75K each election cycle from this system.
Nice.
Yeah, so he had a big old treasure chest.
Incumbent advantage there.
Definitely so. And we'll talk about this a little later, but I think it's really interesting the way he's so smart about using system. Like, one guy in the documentary was like, no, Huey Long didn't break the law. He used the law. He understood it to the point where he knew how to get around it. And if he didn't find a way to get around it, he would just make a new fucking law.
Dude, that's kind of some lawful evil vibes there.
It's very lawful evil. The rare sighting. So yeah, in that spirit, he was super aggressive about getting bills passed. He would just show up on the floor, like, unannounced. Basically, it was a big party whip, which was like, you're gonna fucking pass this, okay? Okay.
Mm-hmm. All right, so strong man in it.
Definitely.
Well, he shows up. I mean, why? How could he convince people to do what he told them to do? Was it like, everybody loves me, so do what I say, or?
It was very much like, do this and I'll hire someone for this job. Like, it was very bribey.
Okay, so basically they were maintaining patronage systems too, and so he's like, you're either going to do what I say or you won't get to promise people anything.
Definitely, yeah. Like, it was very much just an exchange.
Mm-hmm.
That's kind of how he ran things.
What a tactic.
I mean, it fucking worked, is the thing.
Mm-hmm.
And some good shit came out of it, so let's get into that.
Okay.
First was his free textbook program, and this was surprisingly controversial. Shouldn't be, I guess, but it was.
Who needs textbooks?
Well, the problem was, remember all those Catholics?
Mm-hmm.
They were pretty pissed because they all went to private schools, and they saw this as a violation of the separation of church and state.
Why?
Because he was going to give everyone free textbooks regardless of whether you went to private or public school. He's just going to be like, every child gets textbooks.
Yeah.
And they're like, no, we have our own textbooks. We don't want these. Which I'm like, couldn't you just not use them? Like, whatever.
So he was going to give them state of Louisiana textbooks, but they were like, no, we want Jesus Inc. textbooks.
Yeah, and like I didn't find anything that was specifically about like what the differences were, but yeah, it was just
okay.
I think they just did not like him being in their business of education at all.
Yeah.
So this went to the Supreme Court, and Long won, and it resulted in a 20% increase in school enrollment because, remember, like, a lot of people were illiterate, and part of the reason was you had to pay for textbooks.
And that was, he had to suffer through this on his own, right? Like,
for college, yeah.
Yeah, so...
But they had to pay for even, like, in public school, like in, like, K through 12.
Damn. It's not like
insane.
that anymore, y'all.
No, it's not.
You just show up, bring yourself. That's it. I don't know. When we were growing up, I felt like there was a little bit more impelling you to, like, bring supplies, but it's very much on the school system now. Like, you're encouraged to bring supplies, but at least where I've worked, tend to work in Title I, which are kind of lower economic status schools. So a lot of our kids come like without supplies, and that's just normal, expected, and it's just like
it's fucking fine.
Yeah, it's like I don't. No one really judges them, or you shouldn't anyway. I'm just like, hey, here's some paper, here's some pencil. Just basically, just let me know when you end up in that situation. But
yeah. I mean, it's like a job. If you need something for your job, they should give it to you.
yeah. But that was apparently not how it was before.
It was not.
Huey Long stepped in there. All right.
The kids like loved him for this. Apparently, after he died, like in some rural areas of Louisiana, like kids still believed he was alive, and also that he was president.
Wow.
So kids loved him.
He's popular.
Yeah, I love that fantasy world. He built a ton of shit. He built roads, 111 bridges. He built hospitals, schools. Remember those 300 miles of paved roads? He increased that to 2,300 miles.
Wow.
And built a total of 9,700 miles of new roads in general. So I guess those weren't necessarily paved.
Yeah. He paved over some, like, muddy dirt roads that prevented his voters from going to the polls.
He's like, next time I got him.
Cool.
Yeah, and this provided tons of jobs. And this was, like, in the Great Depression. So, yeah, 10% of the nation's highway workers were in Louisiana at the time.
Wow. This is interesting because, like, nowadays, I mean, we're recording this fresh on the heels of the UN report that says, like, the earth is fucked, but can we, like, make it less fucked if we have international coordination immediately? Doesn't look likely. But, there's, okay, well, anyone who goes out, on the roads in the United States, like, yeah, they need, like, repairs and stuff like that. But I don't know. I guess like it's the solution or whatever to infrastructure isn't necessarily building more roads and making everything more car friendly. But like think about his time, roads, weren't even being used by cars 100% of the time. It was just like literally, how can I get from point A to point B even though I'm walking?
Yeah, definitely. Like there was still like horse and buggy stuff going on for poor people. So yeah, definitely. It was just about connecting the state in a way that made more sense for people.
Yeah.
He was also obsessed with LSU. He got weirdly involved.
Okay. Not just like getting them more money, but...
He got them more money, for sure.
Okay.
He was super invested in their football program, like went to every game, fucking composed their fight song.
Wow.
He arranged for cheaper train fare so that students could go to away games. For like cheap.
All right, Louisiana State. Let me see what their fight song is. I bet it's good.
He had some good bangers. Like his fucking Wikipedia page has like compositions as a section, and I heard a few of them. They were good.
Yeah, I used to know more fight songs back when they made NCAA football games. Like,
yeah.
All right, I remember that one. Okay, sorry.
Is it a banger?
Cut that. Yeah, it's pretty good.
Okay. He built new buildings, he founded their medical school, he lowered tuition and established lots of scholarship programs, but he also expelled some students who criticized him in the school fucking newspaper.
What? Just kick them out immediately?
Yeah.
Wow.
Imagine the governor kicking you out of your college. Like, can you even do this?
Wow. That's a little petty.
Yeah, he has some weird relationships with journalists.
Well, I mean, he's kind of bossing, state legislatures around. So journalists, I mean,
they don't like it.
Yeah.
He modernizes public health facilities and increases treatment for mentally ill patients.
Mm-hmm.
He establishes Louisiana's first rehab program for penitentiary inmates. He waived property taxes for half of Louisiana's homeowners by messing with the tax code.
Mm-hmm.
He established night schools, which taught 100,000 adults to read.
Oh, wow.
Increasing that literacy rate.
Cool.
So yeah, cool stuff. Cool programs.
Mm-hmm.
Let's get to the bad stuff, because there was some bad stuff.
So he was doing some good things, building things for people, getting people literacy, getting people access to education. What did he do that wasn't so good?
Well, he sent the National Guard to raid gambling dens and brothels, I guess, in New Orleans with orders to shoot on sight. I guess he was like, I'm shutting this shit down.
Whoa.
He was really aggro about it for some reason.
Should just shoot on sight?
And basically, he was just close them down with orders to, quote, shoot without hesitation. So he sent them to raid it, and let's see, gambling equipment was burned, prostitutes were arrested, $25,000 was confiscated for government funds.
Oh, he just took the money.
He just wanted to shut it down because it was immoral or whatever. But yeah, very shitty.
Yeah, that's kind of strong-handed.
You think?
Yeah, not a recommended course of action, I don't think.
I don't like it. High taxes on gas and cigarettes, reduced the pension for mothers, and also lowered teachers' salaries. So not good there either.
Yeah, I can't imagine teachers were making a whole ton of money.
No, I don't think so, no.
Especially now that they're going to be teaching more kids who can afford to come because they got textbooks.
Right? It's like we just increased your class size by 20%. Now you get paid less.
Yeah, damn. That sucks.
And this one's more just funny. He built a new governor's mansion that highly resembled the White House. And he was like, so I know my way around the place.
When he ends up there?
Yes.
Oh, that's a power move. That one's kind of funny.
That one's funny.
It was probably wasteful, but...
I'm sure. He also kind of enriched himself because, he he did. Whenever there were state cases against corporations, he would hire himself as the attorney. So he would just pocket money from that.
Did he win the cases at least?
I believe so, yeah.
That's still a power move, but that's, I'm sure there were ethics laws written just because of that.
Yeah, not great. So this is funny. In my notes, I have the good, the bad, the impeachment.
Oh.
So let's get to that.
All right.
Back to our nemesis, Standard Oil.
Nobody likes those guys.
He tried to pass a 5-cent a barrel tax on refined oil production to fund all of these cool social programs he was working.
Yeah, and to fund his brothel strike team.
Yeah, I was going to say the mansion, too.
So, to fund the good and the bad programs. But all right, yeah. He's got to get some money. Let's tax the oil guys. I imagine they say, sure, we welcome it.
Not quite. They were really mad about it. And Long was definitely on the offensive. That was kind of his go-to things. If I just talk shit about people, all the news will cover me, and I'm really good at it. And
wow.
He was good at it, and it worked. He basically called anyone who opposed this bill, he called them out as bought by the oil companies, which kind of true. Mm-hmm. But it really pissed them off. So they formed something called, are you ready for this name?
Yes.
The Dynamite Squad.
The oil guys?
Senators who were
or the
for
anti-Long.
The oil guys. Yeah. The anti-Long people.
The Dynamite Squad. That's pretty ominous.
It really is.
I would be checking under my car if I were opposed by the Dynamite Squad.
So this was led by Cecil Morgan and Ralph Norman Bauer.
They sound like jerks because they're supporting the oil companies. But if they were only doing that because they're I don't know, he's bossing people around, maybe they have a point. But
so some of them did have a point. They ended up charging him with 19 charges. Spoiler, only 8 of those charges stuck. Mm-hmm. But they included things like Okay, blasphemy, who gives a fuck? I mean, clearly I don't.
Blasphemy.
Nepotism, okay. Corruption, yeah. Subornation, which is when you basically are underhandedly inducing someone to do a crime. I guess like suggestion of crime.
Why don't you
Cool
steal from this person?
Yeah, so subornation of murder. So he was influencing someone to do a murder, supposedly. And throughout this, his lieutenant governor supported impeachment, so it was like not a good look for him, you know.
Yeah. He would become the governor if that happened, so.
Yeah, exactly. So they bring forth impeachment charges, and Long's like, fuck. So he tries to close the session. And there was a controversy over how this happened. The voting machines showed 68-13 in favor of adjournment, even though, like, just kind of word on the street was that everyone kind of wanted to continue.
Ooh.
So people are like, oh, this is rigged. And then it led to another recurring guest on this podcast, which is a Bloody Monday.
Whoa, more bloody days. What happened to get it bloody?
People were mad about like the way that vote turned out, and they thought it was rigged, and so they threw inkwells, brass knuckles, and Long's brother bit someone in the neck.
Holy shit. He did a Suarez move. Wow.
Yeah.
So they had a full-on...
They had a fucking scuffle.
Yeah. Jeez. Bench clearing brawl.
Yeah, very ridiculous. Again, imagine if that happened.
I mean, that does happen in some countries. You'll see it in the news or whatever. Some parliament people just boxing, basically. But wow, and I mean, it's this isn't to say that it has never happened here. I mean, people have pulled guns on people on the Senate floor and beaten the shit out of people with canes. So
that is true. So after they settled down with some ice packs, they voted to remain in session, and they ended up impeaching him for 8 out of the 19 charges. And Long was really pissed, and so he's like, fuck you guys, this is all because of Standard Oil, like, you know, very much conspiracy kind of guy.
Yeah.
And so he ended up getting enough senators on his side, so they needed the 2/3 majority to convict, and so he got just enough to sign a document that says, I will not convict. And so he basically shut down the proceedings.
Damn.
And later rewarded those senators with positions and other favors. So
I was wondering what he had to promise them to get that. So
yeah, I don't know specifically, but very much was like, hey, do this for me, I'll scratch your back.
They ended up taken care of.
And then now you have a very pissed off Huey. He starts firing people, opponents, people who stood against him, you know, fired their relatives from state jobs, supported their challengers in elections. He hired bodyguards for himself because he got a little paranoid. Yeah, I mean, Dynamite Squad again.
Yeah, that's probably a good idea.
And he established his own newspaper to combat the, quote, lying press. And at first it's called the Louisiana Progress. He later changes that to the American Progress whenever he wants a more national audience. So.
I was going to say, we've seen that this tactic can be kind of effective in the modern world too, of targeting your enemies and just saying, yeah, they're making everything up. They're all in the pocket of whoever. You can only get the truth from me, that sort of thing. I mean, he clearly did have enemies here in terms of the oil companies and stuff, but it's very much an us-them sort of situation.
Yeah, I think it's interesting. Like, one thing I kept bumping up against in the documentary, and keep in mind this documentary is by Ken Burns, they interviewed some journalists, and this one journalist woman in particular, her name is Betty Hodding Carter. Mm-hmm. She is the wife to William Hodding Carter, who is a journalist as well. Mm-hmm. And she was like so obsessed with process in a way that like really bothered me.
Yeah.
Like, all she could talk about was like, yeah, I liked the textbook program, but I don't like how he did it. And like, was very much upset about how he's doing things. But like, as I was watching the documentary and as I was doing research, I'm like, I think everybody did this. Like, we just talked about how Louisiana was like old guard politicians, like who definitely, it was just like an old man club. Like, I think it's funny that that's when you start getting mad about that.
Kind of throughout American history, in this case at the state level, but at the national level too. I mean, people were always like pushing the envelope on what they could do. Just straight breaking laws, really. Liberals nowadays like to be all, like you said, all about the process. But I mean, some of the biggest things, and they're not great, but like some of the major things that we look at in American history were just like, a president saying like, fuck it, I'm going to buy the Louisiana Purchase. Like, okay, or fuck it, I'm going to do that. Whatever, they just make a decision and do it and then worry about it later. It really seems like people get hung up on the process more when it's doing things for people who aren't traditionally served by the system.
Yeah, definitely. And like, it was very frustrating just to hear that over and over from this one woman. Another guy they interviewed too kind of was similar. And then I looked him up, and he was Cecil Morgan, the guy who led the fucking impeachment effort. Oh. And I was like, why didn't you give us that context, bro?
Yeah.
But another journalist, I can't remember this one's name, but I remember he said something like, he basically figured out that he couldn't do the things he wanted to do because of special interests. And so he's like, fuck it, I'll break the rules.
Yeah.
Like, I'll play the same game and beat them at it.
Yeah. That's and that's when they get mad, It's like, oh, you're doing what we do, but for someone else. Yeah.
Yeah. So I don't know. I have mixed feelings about it because, like, obviously, yeah, ideally we have an ethical politician, but like, if you're trying to work within that system, that's just not possible.
It's like what people say about, why don't you go peacefully protest? It's like, if you use the means that people allow you to use, like, they allowed you to use it for a reason. They don't think it's going to work,
Exactly. Yeah. Moving on. After this whole debacle, this is when he gets the nickname, the Kingfish. Is
that just because he's large and in charge, or?
So it's actually named after a character in a radio program, Amos and Andy. And it was like this scheming guy called the Kingfish. And actually, this guy is where we get the phrase "holy mackerel." Isn't that weird?
Yeah.
So, feeling big and powerful after this shutdown of impeachment, he decides to run for Senate and is basically using it as like a referendum. Like, all right, you guys think I'm not cool? I'm going to run for Senate and prove that everyone likes my shit.
Ah, okay.
And because like it was an off year, like he would still have 2 years left as governor. And he said if he lost the Senate race, he would resign as governor.
Whoa, that's a promise.
So he was running against Joseph E. Ransdell, a Catholic who, you remember when he endorsed all those Catholics?
Yeah.
It was one of those.
Ah, okay. So by now he was like, nah, just kidding. Ransdell's not great.
Yeah. This guy, super fucking old, had been in the Senate since Long was 4 years old. This is the guy he calls Old Feather Duster. Also, the documentary showed like illustrations from his newspapers, and they were fucking hilarious. Like, his cartoonist was on point. He at one point drew like all these people as vultures. It was very cool.
I'm still trying to like, okay, why is someone old a feather duster? I don't get it.
I think it's because he's like a dusty old man.
Okay, like someone needs to take a feather duster to him because he's...
Oh, I just thought like feather dusters are dusty.
Yeah. Oh, okay. I was thinking like he's accumulated all this duster. Okay. Yeah. Anyway, point is old.
Yeah. Old, very entrenched, like all the papers in the state like really liked him. But Huey was like, fuck it, I'm going to do this. He bought 2 more sound trucks, printed 2 million flyers, and maybe did a kidnapping.
What?
So there was a critic, Sam Irby, and he was set to testify on Long's corruption charges. And right before the election, he took a vacation for 4 days.
Okay. And then what happened? Where'd he go on vacation?
Well, that's the thing. We don't know.
Okay.
Afterwards, he claimed that he had asked Long for protection, but everyone was like, I'm pretty sure you just kidnapped that man so he wouldn't say shit about you before the election. So...
And then they let him know what was up, and...
I mean, they plausibly could have threatened the fuck out of this guy.
Yeah. Threatened to make him join the Dynamite Club, if you know what I mean.
Yes. It did work. He won 57.3% to 42.7%. There were some accusations of voter fraud.
To be fair, everybody was voter frauding back then, pretty much. That was really widespread.
They had votes in like alphabetical order, along with some celebrity appearances like Charlie Chaplin and Babe Ruth.
Damn, he got some cool endorsements.
They traveled down to Louisiana just to vote for him.
Yeah, well-known Louisiana and Charlie Chaplin. Okay, one more note, though. To be fair, people named people whatever back then. So that could have literally
you could just
been...
named your baby Ruth.
Uh-huh. Everyone in history, like presidents and stuff, they tend to have normal names because they're like the wealthy upper class people. But all throughout history, people name people ridiculous stuff. So
That's true. That's true. He was elected as senator, and remember, he still had 2 terms left as governor, and he was just like, you know what? I'm just going to finish up here as governor. And he said, because Ransdell's so old and shitty, that seat was basically vacant anyway, so, like, whatever.
What? Okay, so he's governor and senator?
Yes, he's both. And, you know, obviously really pissed off his lieutenant governor, who was like, I would like to be in charge now, please. So much so that his lieutenant governor tried to take power when he heard that Long was away in Mississippi. And so Long sent the fucking National Guard.
Holy crap.
Yeah. And then, get this fucking trickster ass move. He then goes to Louisiana Supreme Court and says, well, that guy abandoned his office when he was trying to take over my office, so technically he's not lieutenant governor anymore and should be kicked out. And it worked.
Damn.
Insane.
So he tried to kick out Long, but got kicked out instead.
Yes.
That's pretty good. That's a pretty good move.
It's ridiculous, man. He does some fucking power move shit.
That's the way to handle a coup attempt, I guess.
Right? Did not stand for that. Big man in charge, he's like, fuck it, let's go. He passes 44 bills in 2 hours one day, just as like reading them back to back, just fucking going.
Wow, this is okay. So this is a charisma / I would say intelligence
intimidation
build, maybe.
Yeah, very smart.
Like, this is super hyper focused in convincing people and figuring out how to get around the loopholes, you know?
Definitely. So he passes a ton of shit. At one point, he tries to build a new Capitol building. And one of the senators is like, hey, I don't want to do that. And so he drilled a hole in the current ceiling and moved that guy's seat underneath that hole so that like he would get rained on.
Oh, petty.
He's so petty.
Did he like super need this guy's vote for it, or was he just being an
I mean,
an asshole
maybe
to this
both. Guy? I don't know, but it's fucking hilarious.
Well, but Jim, you see, we need this new building. I mean, you're coming in here soaked to the bone every day.
I don't know. Weird how that happened.
But you say this building's fine, so I guess we'll just keep it.
Continuing on, he endorsed, anyone who was pro-Long, fired anyone who was anti-Long. He bought people with favors and just built up a political machine.
I do want to comment on that.
Yes.
Is that a bad idea? Like,
I mean, that's the thing. Is like, it's legal and it's what happens.
Are you expected to endorse people who don't like you?
Yeah. I think the framing of him is fascinating because they say all this stuff and make it sound like he was the only one doing this. And I'm like, there's no fucking way. This is like the 1930s. And also everyone does this even today.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
You're not going to endorse somebody because they don't like you.
I think, again, the reason that he amassed so much power and people were all of a sudden afraid of it is that he wasn't like trying to balance on top of this largely like popular, unpopular with the masses sort of system. Like, he wasn't just trying to, because, all right, you said the other guys are doing it too. Mm-hmm. But they are from this like small little elite group that is really just vying for convincing people to vote for them anyway, even though they're not going to do anything for them.
Yeah, I think that's the concern, is that he's following the rules, but he's benefiting the wrong people.
Mm-hmm. And so then by doing that, he shows up not only manipulating it to where he gets support from a certain part of that upper class, but then he's getting mass support from all these poor people that he's helping, and they're like, what the fuck, how is he so powerful? Like, that's
what scares him, I think. Yeah,
but he's built a machine. What time period are we talking about at that time?
We're in like the early 1930s. I think this is 1932.
Okay.
He attempted to make something called a cotton holiday, which sounds like a fun festival. Like, I don't know, I'm going to get some jeans or something.
The cotton fair. Okay.
It sounds Texas as fuck, but... So he wanted to stop production for an entire year internationally.
Ooh,
because, again, we're in the Great Depression, and he's like, we got to do something about, like, these prices. Let's figure it out.
Yeah. There was too much cotton on the market. Let's raise prices by not producing cotton for a while, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
And this was a pretty, like, innovative idea at the time. Like, people credit him with, like, yeah, not a lot of people were doing that.
Okay.
He put together a conference with delegates from every cotton-producing state, and everyone was into it except, would you like to guess?
Mississippi.
It was us. It was Texas.
Texas.
And we were, like, one of the larger states, so when we rejected it, it flopped.
We're going to have to rename the Cotton Bowl. We can't do that.
Yeah, right? Everyone will forget about the Cotton Bowl.
So Texas rejected it, and so then it got rejected overall?
Because they like had an agreement, like, we'll only do it if everyone signs on. So, yeah.
Yeah. I wonder if it would have been good.
I don't know. Not sure. Don't know enough about that kind of economics shit.
We're Marxists. We're not that kind of economics people.
Exactly. All right. So now he officially goes to Washington. At one point in the documentary, they talk about his style of dress. And, like, this guy sounds very fashionable.
What was he wearing?
He rocked a white linen suit all the time.
All right. Even after Labor Day?
Oh, yeah. He did not care. They described it as garish, but I'm like, I think you guys are just not fashion innovators, because he would wear, like, colored shirts with, like, a different color tie. And, like, it sounded great. I'm like, this guy sounds fabulous.
It's very Better Call Saul style. Like
a little bit, yeah.
That's okay. So that is considered garish. Washington, D.C. Those guys all wear like blue suits, white or light blue shirt, solid tie. And I mean, they're boring as fuck. So
yeah, I mean, I'd love a pale orange with a paisley tie. Like, sure, that'd be great.
Yeah, hell yeah.
Yeah, snappy dresser. So he finally goes to Washington, and again in the Great Depression, and he is stirring up shit.
What's he do?
He makes a ton of speeches about wealth inequality, and basically is just naming names, calling people out for supporting Hoover and big business, and he's just fucking mad.
All right, so he's doing the Bernie Sanders before Bernie Sanders was cool.
Essentially, yeah. All of this kind of for nothing. None of his bills passed. Like, literally none.
So he was not that effective, you would say?
I would say not, in the traditional sense.
Was he at least, like, reaping popularity, or was it more or less just okay? So he was building up a national base, but wasn't fucking actually doing anything.
I would say, yeah. That's why I said in the traditional sense. He was very influential, which we'll talk about.
Okay.
But I thought this quote was funny. Another senator said, "I do not believe you could get the Lord's Prayer endorsed in this body."
If he was in favor of it, like he'd be like, I don't know now. Well, that's interesting. He's sort of in that way then kind of a precursor of more modern senatorial style of, because some of these guys, like they basically just have a national platform, but they don't do a lot. They're just there.
They're just there to start shit.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. Just to get stuff on the docket. One thing he did was endorse Hattie Caraway for senator of Arkansas. She was a widow, and back then, it still happens today, actually. If a senator dies, like, sometimes the widow will be appointed.
Yeah.
So she served out that term, and now she was running, like, on her own accord. So he went on the campaign trail for her and is largely credited with her win.
Oh, cool.
She actually was the first woman elected to a full term in Senate.
Wow. I don't know if she was any good, so I can't speak to that, but cool.
Mixed bag. Supporter of the New Deal.
Nice.
That kind of stuff. Relief for farmers, flood control. But also filibustered against an anti-lynching bill. So,
well, you can take the girl out of Arkansas.
Can't take the Arkansas out of the girl. Also, Huey was rowdy. He was a rowdy boy.
All right. What did he get up to?
There was this story of this one time he got so drunk, he was really rude to this woman, he took a plate out of her hands and was like, "You don't need that, you're fat, like, fuck that."
Damn.
And then a guy was like, "Hey, like, you don't do that." And so he peed on that guy, pissed on him.
Wow.
And then the dude gave him a black eye. So
good.
He deserved it.
Yeah. What an asshole.
Yeah, he did some shit, man. He was just a rowdy. Like, they talk a lot about his relationship with alcohol. Like, he was on again, off again.
Yeah.
Then we get to Roosevelt.
Okay.
Long opposed the National Recovery Act, which we've talked about, I believe, on this show.
Yeah.
He thought that it was too lenient on industrialists, and he wanted to be able to confirm the senior employees of this because, he's used to his little patronage system.
Okay, yeah. Why did he think it was too lenient on industrial? Just because it, maintained the capital system overall, or?
No, he said it had to do with wage and price codes.
Yeah.
So I guess he didn't think it was, far enough.
Yeah, I can see. Okay, so he's saying, it still leaves enough in their pockets to... that kind of makes sense. It was pretty moderate. People at the time didn't think it was moderate, but...
I'm sure not.
It kind of was.
He claimed it had, quote, every fault of socialism, but not one of its virtues.
Huh. That's an interesting...
Yeah, right?
Perspective.
Yeah. I have a section later where I just kind of want to talk about what we think his views are. So, that quote, save that. Okay. Bookmark it.
Remember.
He went on a 15-and-a-half-hour filibuster, which was the second longest at the time. He filled some of this time by reading the Constitution out loud and giving recipes.
All right.
So, yeah, kind of a dipshit sometimes. He criticized Social Security because he was worried it would be discriminatory to black people, which, good call. He did another filibuster against basically what was the precursor to the Glass-Steagall Act. He later supported it when they changed some stuff.
Okay, yeah. I think he initially liked Roosevelt, but once he's in, he's basically anti-New Deal once it starts happening.
He basically is the only guy really pushing on the New Deal from the left.
Okay.
That is definitely his position in this.
In Washington. There was the Communist Party and stuff.
But... Oh, yeah, for sure. Yeah. Which we'll talk about that too.
Okay.
But yeah, he canvassed hard for Roosevelt in 1932, and a lot of people credited his nomination to him. He was kind of expecting a big, speaking spot on that, but, only got a very small Midwestern tour, and he's like, hey, what the fuck?
Yeah.
But yeah, overall, he was very much pushing from the left and just why aren't we doing more? Absolutely calling him out, and to the point where FDR was kind of worried about him.
As a challenger?
Definitely. At one point, he calls him the most powerful man besides, what's the guy that was in the Pacific? MacArthur? No.
Douglas MacArthur?
Yeah, that guy.
Oh, okay.
So yeah, he was intimidated for sure.
Yeah, MacArthur was one of the few figures that's, I guess we didn't really go through that kind of Napoleonic phase of a general could take over, but.
Yeah, he could have done it.
Yeah.
All this in mind, his uncomfortableness with his popularity, he started kind of trying to undermine him. FDR did.
Okay.
He put Long's opponents in charge of federal programs in Louisiana, which obviously he was not a fan of because he very much still had his finger on the pie over there.
Yeah.
He supported an inquiry into election fraud for one of Long's friends. And finally, he got the IRS to investigate him, which is one of the first incidences of that being used politically. Yeah,
well, the IRS...
I guess it was new.
Yeah, I was trying to... It had been around a while, but the federal government was ballooning in size at the time, so the IRS would have been a small fry thing before that time.
Yeah. He didn't get any charges on him, but some of his friends got charged with tax evasion. So
that's still weakening to him because he should have been able to protect him. So
yeah, exactly.
Very undercutting.
At one point, he was supposed to be making a statement on the Platt Amendment, which was basically negotiating conditions for withdrawing from Cuba and the continued withdrawing after the Spanish-American War.
Yeah.
Long got up there and was like, "I'm not here to talk about that. I want to talk about the Chaco War."
It's Latin American, right?
Yeah, same thing. But this was cool. He basically was like, hey, fuck this. So the Chaco War was a conflict between Bolivia and Paraguay. I believe this is mentioned in Open Veins.
Yes, it is.
Okay, that's what I thought. I'm like, this story sounds familiar for some reason. And Long was like, hey, Paraguay should own the oil. Standard Oil is just backing these revolutions, and they started this war with Paraguay. And This is where we get that quote where he calls them domestic murderers, foreign murderers, international conspirators. Just really takes him to fucking task.
He was right.
Yeah. And he became a hero in Paraguay, and they named a captured Bolivian fort after him, Fort Long.
Huh. What a namesake. Like, just geographically, that's wild.
Right? Like, that's how internationally known he was.
Yeah.
He was very, like, isolationist. He was against the Spanish-American War and World War I. He just was like, these are Wall Street's wars, fuck that. He demanded independence for Philippines and opposed entry into the World Court for the United States. So
that's interesting. You know, isolationism gets a bad rap because it makes it sound like you are fine with fascists taking over, you know, because that's also the term you would use for, like, people who are against American entry into World War II and stuff.
Exactly,
right?
Yeah. So I think that's, again, an interesting characterization of things that, like, are pretty good. Like, yeah, we should be for independence for the Philippines.
Yeah, like, he was, I think at the time, may have been considered, like, anti-imperialist, you know? Didn't want to go take over this shit.
And he correctly recognizes these wars as being, like, puppets for companies.
Mm-hmm, yeah.
This is where we get into the Share Our Wealth program.
This one has a great name, so I think I'm for it.
Great name, pretty good. That's my review.
All right.
So this came out in 1934. It had kind of a precursor, but it doesn't super matter, the details of that. If you want it, they're in the notes on the Patreon. But the program itself, he announced on a nationwide radio broadcast. So the skinny on this is basically, we're going to start capping money.
You can't make too much money.
Yes.
A maximum income.
Listen to these numbers. They are amazing.
All right. I love the idea, first of all, a maximum income. I mean, it's not 100% because, like, I mean, so many of the richies now are, like, paid in, not in, you know, wages, but we could figure that out too.
Yeah. There's so many, like, assets and, like, secret bank accounts and shit.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, that'd be a whole nother thing. But in this one, we are capping fortunes at $50 million.
What was this, 1934?
1934.
1934. How much, 50 million?
Yes. Let's find out the exchange rate there. I guess that's not what that's called. Inflation rate. It is exchange rate if you get a time machine.
2021, 1934. That's $1 billion.
That's, like, so good.
So he was just like, no billionaires, basically.
That's so reasonable.
Billionaires should not exist. He was Bernie before Bernie.
Essentially, yes. He had a progressive tax code in this. If you made over $1 million, you'd be taxed at 1%, $2 million, 2%, etc. It would cap individual inheritances, I believe, at $5 million. Some of these numbers shift around as he, like, kind of keeps talking about these plans. You know, later he raises that cap to anywhere between, like, 1 million and 15 million. So, like, I don't consider him a numbers guy. Definitely not a wonk. He's just like, people should have less money. Like, fuck that.
So $5 million inheritance is $100 million.
Which is, like, a lot of dollars still. Like, you'll be fine.
That's so good, though. Like, that would be crazy. Yeah, okay.
Right?
Also, this is not like, obviously, this isn't real socialism or communism or anything. This is just, you know, redistribution crudely under capitalism. But, like, still, this would be
huge.
Yeah.
If someone suggested this today, they would get shot. The funds from this would basically go to UBI, a $5K single payment and a minimum annual income of $2 to $3K, which would be about a third of the average family homestead value and income. So just, like, basic shit.
A $5,000
a single payment, and then you get an annual income of $2,000 to $3,000.
All right, $5,000 is $100,000.
That's a lot.
Then $2,000 is $40,000.
That's not that bad.
I get paid $40,000 a year. Mm-hmm. And I already got paid $100,000.
$100,000 to, like, you know, buy a house or whatever you need to do.
Invest it, retire on it.
Yeah.
Damn.
Pretty good.
Yeah.
That's not all.
Oh, all right. What else?
We are supplementing this program with free college, admission based on an IQ test, which is, like, I kind of get, but, like, also IQ test is a historically bad thing.
Yeah, that may be, you know, what they thought was good then, but admissions, you know, some sort of admissions process. But if you can get in, it's free.
If you didn't want to do that, there's vocational training. veterans benefits, federal assistance to farmers, massive public works projects, increased to pension. Here's where it gets juicy, chef's kiss. Oh, month vacation for every worker.
Whoa.
A month.
This is real welfare state shit.
This is some French shit. Like, have you seen like tweets about like people in France like, bye, I'm gone for a month?
Yeah.
It's amazing.
Yeah, in Europe in general, yeah.
Yeah, just in Europe in general, yeah.
Yeah, what you get, it's probably only for like the professional class, and not everyone can do that.
I'm sure.
We're not sure. We don't know about the intricacies of it, but
yeah. Limit the work week to 30 hours a week.
30-hour work week. Damn.
Yeah. Free medical service and a war on disease, which would incorporate the Mayo brothers from like the Mayo Clinic.
Yeah.
And some land reclamation to end the Dust Bowl.
Wow. So, I mean, they did some of that. Like, they did huge land conservation and reclamation projects as part of the New Deal for the Dust Bowl thing. That was probably stolen from him. That
is what happened. Basically, the second New Deal was a direct attempt to, one, steal some thunder from Huey Long and be like, he don't need to do that anymore. We already did the thing.
Yeah.
And two, to like appeal to that need. Like there was clearly a desire for it.
Yeah. That's why he was so popular.
And this was like a counter to those demands.
That is some of this shit, man. Like
a month.
I would love still to have this now.
Absolutely. Like that's, I think what's amazing about like looking into this, I'm like, these all sound good. I would like this.
Yeah. Free healthcare back then.
Yeah.
That's what he's already saying.
Yeah. This is 1934.
Burning before it was cool, man.
Yeah.
But I guess it was cool. People, you said he was popular at the time.
People fucking loved this. And he also, again, was a very good salesman. So he was talking about this constantly. He wrote another fucking song. Loves to write a song. He also had a campaign song too. The Every Man a King. He had a cute little song for that. My favorite part is the last part where it's or in the winter time or spring, there'll be peace without end. Every neighbor a friend, with every man a king.
Cute.
Isn't that cute? I think there's a Cheryl Wealth song too. I can't remember that one, but
I need to bring back slogan song, like songs written for campaigns. Now they just do songs, like actual already songs,
Yeah,
but back in the day they used to like write little jingles and stuff. Like
it was very like jingle sounding. Like it had like a little big band behind it, and one of them had like a pianist guy singing. It was great.
Yeah, that was. Let's bring that back.
Yeah. Again, very good salesman. So he like wrote a book on this. He had the song. He was doing like radio spots for it. Like he was pushing this shit. He formed his own political organization, the Share Our Wealth Society. Basically to, again, push the Dems to the left and push FDR to the left. And it was super fucking popular. In a year, they had 7.5 million members.
Wait, so you're telling me that he was able to push the president to the left, but not by like joining and supporting him?
Weird, right?
I've never heard of this strategy.
He had to be antagonistic? What?
That's all conventional wisdom flies in the face of that.
Super weird. Dude, this guy was so popular. They had trucks for the Senate mail. One out of the two trucks was just for his mail.
Oh. Just imagine the poor other senators standing there with their hands in their pockets like, anything for me?
Not today. It's all Huey's.
And they're just like hauling bags to Huey Long's office.
He's like Santa Claus. He was the third most photographed man behind FDR and Charles Lindbergh.
Wow. Okay, that's a crew. Because Charles Lindbergh was quite on the other side.
Absolutely. Unions were super into his shit. They're like, yeah, this sounds great. Economists, as you can imagine, were like, this is not great.
Yeah.
They got very hung up on the math of it, which, like, I get it.
Wonk's gonna wonk.
They're like, this tax plan actually would only get people $400 a year. And, the taxes would actually cap average income at $3,000. And, they're just raining on the parade.
Yeah, which is what they're always want to do.
Yeah, right. It's like, think about who becomes an economist, guys.
But how are you going to pay for it?
Yeah.
They're the Jake Tappers of their day.
Definitely.
Well, I'm curious. So you talked about what their reaction was. there was a pretty powerful socialist and communist current at the time. Not powerful in terms of like really wielding power, but like popular.
Yes.
What were their thoughts on Mr. Long?
It's interesting. Actual communists, because he did not consider himself communist, and I don't think anyone would, really. But I say that contemporaries called him a communist.
Right. They said this is communism.
communist.
But it's the same thing with Bernie. Is like, this is not communism. This is nice capitalism. But
they even jokingly called him Karl Marx of the Hillbillies, which is a great fucking name.
Hell yeah. I want to be the Karl Marx of the Hillbillies.
It sounds great. I'm just like picturing Marx in like overalls and with like a corncob pipe.
Yes.
He can keep the beard.
Yeah. Overalls.
Yeah, absolutely. But actual communists were not into him because they didn't think it was like far enough. And they also pointed out the fact that his workers that he was like building all those roads with got paid 10 cents less than like what the NRA actually called for.
Okay. He's not walking the walk.
But yeah, they would actually distance themselves from him actually by calling him fascist, which we'll get into that discussion too, because I think that's very interesting.
Huh. I wonder if that was even a good move. Like, he seems pretty popular. He might be like, no, we kind of want to do what he does, but
more. Yeah, I know. I don't think that was a good move either, but okay.
Yeah, we got it. Well, it's more important to be right than popular, I guess. That's one of our things.
Apparently. So during all this, busy guy making his programs, he still had a finger in the pie over in Louisiana. He basically got a puppet governor elected, one of his boyhood friends. He was still showing up there and passing bills, even though he had no legal authority to be there.
He was just hanging out.
Yes.
Okay.
He even passed a, quote, tax on lying, which was a 2% tax of newspaper ad revenue. So again, journalists fucking hated this guy.
Yeah. Enemies of the people.
Yeah, not great. He was not into the free press.
Yeah, to be fair, the press
is not free.
Is touted as this like unbiased whatever, which it's not 100%, It definitely, it caters to its, and this is a big thing about manufacturing consent, right? It's like, it has its interests too. Not to say we should just stifle or have just one outlet that prints the approved news or whatever, but I guess you can see where he's coming from in a way.
I think so, yeah. But I think he took it like a little far.
Yeah.
So he's still mobilizing all this power, both in Louisiana as very much a stronghold and now nationally with just being a popular, cool guy. Then he literally writes a book called My First Days in the White House.
Whoa. Awesome title.
Yeah. And FDR is real worried. He's like, fuck, he's going to split the ticket. And then, for him, the worst case scenario was he splits the ticket and then Republicans win and they make shit worse. And so then Long can come in and just be like absolutely in control.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah. Which okay.
It doesn't sound good. It doesn't sound bad. Cause it sounds like he might be a little bossy. But, it does sound like he'll do some cool things.
That's, the main tension I have with this figure is that, the methods, some of them kind of suck, but, he's doing cool shit. But, does that mean I'm, a sellout or something, that I'm willing to have, a benevolent dictator? But, I don't know, man.
So one thing I think he would run up against is, it's a little harder to dictate your way on the national scene. But even if he's in the executive chair, as a senator, senators have kind of a ton of power, especially back then, to cool down, and it's designed that way, to put the brakes on what the government's trying to do. So whereas he could kind of run roughshod in Louisiana and run it as his fiefdom, I don't know how effectively he would have been able to pull that off at the national level.
I think that's evident in him not being able to pass anything.
Yeah.
Back to Louisiana. He had a lot of people there that hated him. And they formed a new squad called the Square Deal Association.
All right, the squares, got it.
Yeah, they're like, in the New Deal, we're the Square Deal. I'm like, I know what you're trying to do, but you do just sound like nerds.
That was a thing. The square deal?
I feel like I've heard of that.
This was Teddy Roosevelt's thing from back in the day.
Oh.
It was pretty boring, though. I mean, it was just like consumer protection, corporation like regulation sort of stuff, and conservation of natural resources. Not that exciting, but it was a square deal.
I zoned out halfway through that list, so.
Let's do a little regulation, do a little, yeah.
So you remember that 5-cent tax he got impeached for Standard Oil?
Yeah.
It finally passed.
All right, good.
And Standard Oil was like, not good. I'm going to leave the fucking state.
They packed up their ball and went home?
They threatened to.
Oh,
and
okay.
This really pissed off these square deal motherfuckers. So they seized a courthouse.
Whoa, okay. Just one courthouse? The main courthouse, or?
The East Baton Rouge Parish Courthouse.
All right.
So, in the capital.
Well, okay, then what did they do? That's a weird first move.
Right. Long did not fuck around, as we know. He does not take coups lightly.
Sent in the National Guard or something?
Absolutely. Sends in the National Guard. Establishes martial law and a curfew, and banned public gatherings of 2 or more people, forbade publication of criticisms of state officials.
Wow, okay.
Yeah.
Well, now I'm starting to see what Roosevelt was worried about.
Not great. Not great. This is, again, he does dicey things.
Well, okay, but an analysis of the situation he's facing, it's not like he kept that in place forever.
Yeah.
It's just like, hey, this is an emergency. They did shitty things whenever they were in the emergency of, like, the Russian Civil War or Spanish Civil War. Like, when you're in a dicey situation, you do dicey things, I guess.
It's going to get worse, so we'll see how you feel in a minute.
Okay.
The square dealers eventually left the courthouse, but then, like, shit popped off at the airport. Tear gas and ammo was fired. Only one was wounded and no deaths, so that kind of calmed down a little. But Long was very pissed. So
yeah.
He called 2 special sessions in Louisiana, again, where he has no fucking jurisdiction.
Oh, he just suggested it to his
puppet.
To his friend who just so happened to.
Exactly.
Okay.
And he created new agencies, which he controlled through state appointments, including a state printing board that could just shut down newspapers.
Okay, all right.
Including election supervisors to appoint poll watchers.
Okay.
And a state board of censors.
All right. Censors for the press, I guess?
I believe so.
All right.
Not good.
What about this? That's heavy-handed.
It's pretty bad. Yeah, I'm not into it.
I'm not into it. I would be into it if this was, like, done in the context of, hey, we just, the People's Soviet of Louisiana just took over and we're having to, like, fight against, reactionary, like, counter-revolutionaries that the rest of the United States keeps sending. Okay, fine. You got to do what you got to do, but
this is just a guy.
Yeah, this is just, him silencing critics, so.
Yeah. And, in his mind, though, I think it's not that revolutionary, but in his mind, it's like, this is Standard Oil fucking with me again. Like, you could take that generous view of it.
Oh, yeah, that generous view, or just, again, the broad view of, like, these guys aren't mad that I did these things. They're mad that I did these things, like, but not on their behalf. If I were serving their interests, like, they would not be bringing out the guns on me. It's because I'm serving the little man instead of them, know? Like, that's the difference.
Yeah.
So, I can see why. I still think, it's not the best move. But I guess we would be saying not the best move if he just let them do a coup on him.
Yeah. So what are you going to do?
But it does look bad.
It does look bad. Not a great look. So, September 8th, 1935. This is when he passes a bill to basically gerrymander away a district for one of his enemies, Judge Benjamin Pavey. He
doesn't want that guy to, like, have power anymore. Okay.
Yeah.
He's going to redraw his district out of existence or something.
He does this, and he's leaving the courthouse, and Pavey's son-in-law, Carl Weiss, approaches him. It's this nerd-looking dude. And the generally accepted story, we'll talk about that in a second, is that Weiss fired at Long a single shot, and Long's bodyguards, which were hilariously / terrifyingly nicknamed the Cossacks or the Skull Crushers. That's a great name.
I don't really want to hear the story of how they got that.
Yeah. Great name for a metal band, but not cool for bodyguards.
We're the Skull Crushers.
What's up? They shot Weiss at least like 40 to 60 times. So
that's a lot.
That's a lot of times.
Wow.
Yeah. They later did some what's it called? Like forensic studies on this. Mm-hmm. They like dug up some bones and did some analysis, and some eyewitnesses claimed that Weiss merely punched Long and the bodyguards did the shooting. Mm-hmm. And based on the trajectories, they think that it's possible that Long was actually just caught in the crossfire from like a bullet ricocheting off of the marble walls in the building.
Shit.
Yeah.
So he got caught in his own guards.
That's what they
dumb dick shooting each other.
Yes. Like that's very possible.
Wow. What do you think? Do you think that it was maybe that, or
I think it could have been?
Is there a consensus or like a leaning one way or the other, or is it like a pretty even camps?
I think the generally told story is the single shot, mm-hmm. but there is always like a reference to this, like it's unclear. Mm. I think it very much could have happened that way though, because he was very paranoid, and he did get like death threats and stuff like on the reg.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it could go either way, but I lean towards the punching story.
This guy didn't. Sorry, I was going to say, what did this guy say about it? But he didn't say shit. He got shot 60 times.
He was dead.
Yeah.
He didn't say anything.
Damn. All right. So he died from that one shot?
He did. He was rushed to an operating room. He died 31 hours later.
That's, one of the grim facts about that, the past, is how many people just die in excruciating pain after like gunshot wounds that could be pretty, that people would survive now. Yeah. And in fact, some of Long's people thought that like the operation was botched and like they could have saved him or something. Like they thought it was a conspiracy. So it probably wasn't a conspiracy. It was just how
they're probably just bad at operations.
I think it was James Garfield died in a similar way. Mm-hmm. It's but like back then you just surgery was shit and.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely, it was super dangerous.
Yeah, so people just died because they got shot, even though they didn't really. Nowadays they'd survive. So
yeah,
that sucks.
What was interesting in the documentary, they got reactions from people, and all the poor people were like, "Yeah, it was really fucking sad," and like they were very upset about it. And then remember our friends, the journalist and that one legislator, they're all like, I mean. Like Damn. One guy was like, yeah, if you're at a party, people will just talk about wanting to kill him. Like that's just what would happen. Like every party I went to.
That's crazy. I mean, they weren't complaining about the process then. Carl Weiss should have, voted to impeach him, not shot him. They weren't, they weren't raising objections. Yeah. Like
one guy straight up said he was glad he died. Like they're like, it's tragic that it happened that way, but like, I'm not going to lie, I was okay with it.
I think people in general would be better served by that easiness of morality of like, I don't know, it's kind of okay to be glad when your enemies suffer. And at least politically, I don't know. Like,
I think so. Yeah, I get annoyed when people are like when Trump had COVID, everyone's like, oh, we shouldn't wish bad things. Like, whatever, I'm doing a fucking summoning circle to hell.
Yeah. I just think it is hypocritical because, you feel like, good. I don't know. You feel, and not just with people dying, but like.
When bad things happen to them.
Yeah. Or they suffer defeat or something, you're just like, it's not just, I don't know what I'm trying to
I think we have an obsession with like being a noble loser, like a good loser.
Yeah.
As opposed to a sore loser.
And like, I don't know if the other side, I don't know if the right wing necessarily has that. Like they understand the power struggle, and it's just like
they delight in it.
And it's good when your enemies are dead and no longer able to menace you.
Absolutely.
And I think that, real revolutionaries actually understand that too, rather than more like liberal posturing of like, oh, it's, that's a tragedy or whatever.
Yeah. After he passes, his widow replaces him in the Senate and actually won the next election. And basically, there's like a whole political dynasty. His brother Earl was governor for like 2 terms. His son became a senator in 1948.
That's Russell Long. He was really long serving, I think.
Yeah, he went from 1948 to 1987.
He's, if you've watched the movie JFK, he makes, not him, but an actor portraying him. He's the guy on the plane who talks to Garrison at the beginning of the movie, and he's like, that dog don't hunt, that talking about the Warren Commission findings or whatever. That was Russell Long, who apparently had voiced doubts about the JFK conspiracy or all that.
Interesting. Yeah, he was interviewed in the documentary a few times. I mean, obviously a biased view there, but like I liked him. And at one point he said something along the lines of like, the people got what they voted for, and that's more than a lot of people can say. We're not trying to say he was great on everything for sure, or even sufficient on most things, but like, damn, it's still pretty impressive, like looking from our perspective, maybe from our meager sad American perspective. Yes, that's a big context. So that brings us perfectly to kind of, I have this section where I just ask questions, and the first question is, was he a fascist? And in this documentary, there are a ton of comparisons to fascists. Like obviously the people who didn't like him were saying like, Mussolini and Hitler, they got the trains there on time. They provided for people.
Mussolini did not get the trains running on time. This is a lie.
A lie?
Yeah, the trains were just as bad as or as good as the same. They were the same as they were before. So that's a lie.
Okay, yeah, that was my question, because they're saying that's the thing about fascism is they have to provide something for people. I'm like, do they? Did they? Is that a thing? Because like, sometimes, I don't think so.
So they did. I mean, in some ways, they regiment things. So. They're able to marshal the forces of the state into, it's basically like capitalism organizing itself as a gang and just running things. Unemployment went way down in Nazi Germany and stuff. They gave people jobs and things, even if it was in the heavily militarized, but like shovel brigade type thing where instead of a rifle, you had a shovel and you were doing like conservation work or whatever, but it was like mainly to train you for the military. Or to build, lots of heavy machinery that they can then easily convert to tanks when they wanted to. Like, yes, it can do that. And they did have like workers programs and stuff, like health clubs and things that could be like health spas and things and vacations and sure. But it was built in an exclusionary way. Only some people got to do this, right? That was the whole thing. Like fascism isn't really a mass appeal to everyone so much as a mass appeal to people who are willing to, put their body into the state machinery, basically.
So like, I thought it was so interesting that that's immediately where they went to. It's just like, this is fascism. I'm like, I mean, some of his methods, again, they sucked, but like, I don't know if that makes him a fascist.
I don't know. I definitely wouldn't characterize him as an ideological fascist for sure. Like, he probably, if you sat down and talked to him, he probably like couldn't accurately explain what fascism was. Or, maybe he could. He's a smart guy, sure, but like, it doesn't look like he was pursuing that as a political like program. I'm going to do fascism for sure.
No, like, so there actually is a quote. Someone asked him if we'd ever have fascism in America, and he said, sure, only if we'll call it anti-fascism, which like is true.
Or it was just, Americanism or something.
I think too, the fact that he amassed so much power in one state to the point where he was absolutely controlling everything in there, like, was intimidating and has some fash vibes.
Yeah, I would definitely call it like dictatorial. I just, as a political ideology, I don't think it was fascist, but it was certainly, tyrannical in a way. I mean, he was the strong man, but maybe more so in this, like, because it's not born of the military. It's not particularly militaristic.
He had the National Guard, and he like whipped them out for anything.
Sure, but he wasn't like saying we need to make sure we go conquer Arkansas. So it wasn't a fascist in that regard, or like focused on an outward enemy or anything like that. It was just more like, make sure you follow me and you're going to be good. Like, which I guess is more of a, I don't know, more of like a classic old school, like patronage style system, which is what he was running, I don't
know, this brings us to our next question, which was he a demagogue? So this term gets thrown around a lot, and so I looked it up. And it is defined as a political leader who seeks support by appealing to the desires and prejudices of ordinary people rather than using rational argument. And this just feels like another populist kind of thing.
Yeah, because like, I think that, yes, he's a demagogue because he appeals to these broad support. But like, it's kind of a bias baked into the definition of like, whatever the people want is opposed to
apparently not rational.
Yeah,
I'm like, what the fuck? Like, that's not a bad thing. And also, like, yeah, assuming people are irrational, and the prejudices is very like trying to say, oh, it's probably racist, and it's like everyone is prejudiced, and also prejudice can be positive, So yeah, it just is a very interesting term that is constantly used to define him. Even in his own time was used to define him, and shortly afterwards, like there were plays and stuff written basically about him.
Didn't they write a book about him? It Can't Happen Here? Yes.
It was based on a Southern guy who rose to power, and yeah.
I read that book. It was during I think it was still the primaries. I think it was still in 2015 that I read that.
And everyone was like, oh, this is definitely Trump, right?
And it was wild. Yeah. I was like, and I was thinking, oh, this is definitely Trump. I was like, this is eerie.
Yeah. So they had that. They also had All the King's Men, which was basically based on him. A Lion is in the Streets. Both of those got later turned into films. And like, I understand, like, I clearly have a bias here. Like, I think this guy's, one, fucking funny.
Yeah.
And two, like, he did some good things. And so, like, it's very hard for me to criticize in this way. I think I want people to question that instinct to immediately label him as fascist or a demagogue or, in that negative way.
Yeah. And we're never trying to paint anyone as 100% saint or sinner.
He did some shit that I did not like, as we talked about. He had more than 3 strikes. Let's say that.
When you're talking about bias, I do think people should, maybe if this is your first time, understand that this, sure, we have a bias. We're not trying to claim that we don't. Yeah. Sometimes, we'll see a review that's like, this is biased for communism. Like, yeah.
It's like, look at the name, bro.
But we're, there's a lot of built-in bias in how, and at least I guess we should speak maybe just for America, but globally and maybe in more Western or capitalist countries, there's a bias toward that status quo of the system of capitalism, right? And liberal democracy. And like you were saying in the documentary, like the institutions, the norms, the process, has to be respected. That's the bias that I think maybe history colors along with is, oh, he broke these and he was, all about amassing power for himself and less focused on, well, what was he trying to do that for?
Because, even though, again, everyone was fucking doing it too.
Yeah. And that, I think that's the real difference, is you don't want to focus on what he was doing it for, because that's the real thing they have a problem with.
Yeah. And like, lest people somehow come away with this thinking, oh, demagogue means good, populist means good in all cases. Like, obviously in the case of like Donald Trump, he was doing bad things like unethically, both in process and in results. Like, yeah, that's bad for sure.
We're essentially maybe saying that, and this is a discussion I feel like we kind of revisit from time to time, is the importance of thinking about what are your ends when judging someone's means. And, we kind of say it sometimes. It's like, we don't like when our enemies do this thing, but we think we should do that thing. Like,
yeah. Like, this guy did some nasty shit to get shit done.
yeah, it's in the context of peacetime. So it's, you know, it's different than what we've seen in other situations where we're like, ah, damn, this guy started executing people, but hey, it was a civil war, you know? Like, I think that is kind of important to do when you're looking at history, you know, is
the context.
Yeah, context. And it's not to absolve anyone or whatever. It's really just to say, really just to get the whole picture, you know? Definitely,
yeah. And I think he did really cool stuff, especially for the time. And again, like, from our perspective of today, like, if someone suggested this shit today, it'd be like, what the fuck? Like, it would be the most radical thing in the world, and everyone would lose their fucking minds over it.
Yeah, for sure. And it's interesting that he does all this, like, when people ask him, like, are you, you know, a socialist or a communist? He's like, nah, I'm not.
No, he said he was anti-communist. He said these were measures to prevent communism.
Boo.
Which, like, yeah, that sucks.
But, yeah, I mean, you know, you can also see where he probably had a good reason to think that was a good idea.
Yeah. He actually would attack FDR as communist to, like, take fire off of him.
Oh, yeah, you want to see the real communist? That's
yeah. Even though he didn't think he was left enough, which, like, bad methodology, but okay.
Never said he was a political scientist.
Yeah. One of the things that I loved about the documentary was they do a ton of interviews with poor people. And, like, you can see where they're living, and, like, they're old enough to have remembered him and voted for him. And they all fucking loved him.
Yeah.
Like, they were like, he did this for me. He did this for me. Like, you know, was absolutely on his side. And I just thought that was so telling. You could obviously see this clear class distinction between who liked him and who didn't.
And I think that's real powerful, too, because the process people who are like, oh, he didn't do it the right way, you know, is you can tell that they, like, did not, that this was, and it's the same thing we saw with, you know, liberal journalism under Trump and everything, is it doesn't materially affect them, you know. It's just, the rude man is on TV. They didn't need the free
textbooks.
Yeah. Oh, he's so rude and he's so crass and whatever. And that was what was bothering them. Whereas other people were like, no, he did this thing for me. I got this because of him. Like, they have a real vested interest in him and his policies.
Or conversely now, like, we don't hear anything about what the fuck Biden is doing because he's being polite about it. Or asleep in a back room somewhere.
And because it doesn't, you know, and the journalist class, like, they don't. They're
fucking fine.
They can now go to brunch instead of paying attention to the news, right?
Once again, ending on a downer. It is the way. In summary, he did some bad stuff, but he did some cool stuff. He sounds fucking hilarious. Like, would definitely get drunk with this man. But then he'd probably, like, do some
pee on somebody.
He might pee on somebody.
Who does he look like? He looks like
he looks like fucking
Nathan.
What's the guy?
Nathan Lane.
I love him. Yeah. Nathan Lane.
I was trying to remember his last name. Nathan Lane.
He was played by John Goodman, which I'm like, okay, sure, but, like,
played by John Goodman. Nathan Lane. What? I gotta watch the Huey Long movie.
And there was a movie. Oh, it's just called Kingfish: The Story of Huey P. Long. It's a 1995 movie.
I gotta watch that.
Again, missed opportunity for Nathan Lane.
Yes, sure. He looks not exactly like him, but very like him.
But really similar.
Yeah.
I think he's very handsome. What are we doing next week?
Next week, we are going to watch a movie.
Hell yeah.
Mainly because I'm going back to school, starting up work again. So, like,
understandable. Yeah, we need a break.
Yeah, and then I'll find some time to carve out some more research later. But yeah, we're doing a movie. We're going to watch Brazil.
Okay, I've heard about this.
So Brazil's a movie, I think it's from 1985, directed by Terry Gilliam. It's got a lot of, like, commentary, social commentary, and it was, like, kind of sci-fi, dystopian, talking about, like, you know, fascism and bureaucracy and, you know, a totalitarian style government, and it's got a lot of different angles, and it's a weird one. So
buckle in.
Yeah, so buckle in.
Kind of dovetails nicely, though, with what we've been talking about today. So
yeah. it can't happen here, but it's already happened.
It did happen here.
So as far as where to watch, there's several, rental options. There's also the plethora of media collections online that one can sleuth around to find if you are so inclined. Lots of different ways to try to obtain it, however you see fit.
Yes.
But it's great. So check it out if you haven't already. Find a way to do so.
Cool. In the meantime, you can find us online. We're on Twitter at teachcommunism, Instagram at teachmecommunism. You can send us an email if you're like, Christine, you're way too cool with that guy being a dictator. And let me tell you how I feel about it. You can send us an email at teachmecommunism@gmail.com.
That's fair. I sometimes wonder, am I too apologetic for, which I would welcome thoughts on how to better frame that.
Yeah. I mean,
it's something that nerdily enough, or I don't know enough, but I do sometimes just think about throughout the day.
Space out.
Yeah. So I welcome input.
It's very Lenin vibes. What is to be done? Sometimes you gotta do some bad shit.
But what if he was wrong?
Which, I have mixed feelings on as well. Anyway, again, greatest philosophy is just a big shrug emoji. I don't know.
Yep.
All right. That's my official stance is, I don't know. That's my campaign slogan.
Who knows?
My new song. It's just, I don't know.
Yeah. If you run for stuff in the future, you got to write your own songs.
Absolutely. You should also leave us a review on Apple Podcasts. It is the best way to help people find the show, and it makes me feel good. So do that. You don't have to be like an Apple user to leave a review. It's just very helpful for the numbers.
And for our self-esteem.
Mm-hmm. We also have a YouTube, if that's how you like to listen to podcasts. And finally, we have a Patreon, patreon.com/teachmecommunism. For $5 a month, you get access to our notes. This time you'll be getting my notes. So enjoy.
Yeah. I was lazy, didn't write any notes.
Hell, you deserve it. You do all the notes all the time. I'm usually the lazy one. It's a pretty great gig, right?
Yeah, no, it was nice.
And at the end of the year, the proceeds from that will go to a mutual aid fund in Dallas, Texas. So support those guys.
Yeah, put your money toward your comrades.
Hell yeah. All right, I think that's it, man.
I think so. Thank you for teaching me about this. I learned a lot about Huey Pierce Long.
Nice. Yeah, he's a fucking weirdo. I enjoyed the research process.
Awesome. And thank you, dear listeners, for tuning in. You guys are just some of the best people.
Absolutely.
You can tune in next week for another episode of Teach Me Communism, where the class struggle is always in session.
All right, I'm going to go eat a tostada.
That sounds great.
Yeah, it's going to be great.
See ya.
Bye.